वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन के सपने को साकार करने के लिए हमें आगे आना चाहिए.
On one nation, one election, on simultaneous elections. Those recommendations have been accepted today by the Union Cabinet.
हमने इस वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन की मुखालिफत की.
Namaskar, you are with Jist and I am Rahul Srivastav. The Narendra Modi cabinet today cleared a move that will shake India's political earth. Hypothetically, the move can bring in a lot of sanity, but that's hypothetically. It includes extremely complex and widespread tweaking. Before all that happens, it will create a political tsunami of protests. It will make the entire political opposition to the BJP erupt like no eruption after the imposition of emergency in 1975. There were hints that the government is about to press the start button on it, came when Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about it in his Red Fort speech.
मैं चाहूंगा कि देश ने बार बार चुनाव इस देश की प्रगति में रुकावट बन रहे हैं, गतिरोध पैदा कर रहे हैं. आज कोई भी योजना को चुनाव के साथ जोड़ देना आसान हो गया है, क्योंकि हर 3 महीने 6 महीने कहीं न कहीं चुनाव चल रहा है. वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन के लिए देश को आगे आना होगा.
Let's first begin with a micro example to depict what it entails. People of Haryana voted for 10 Lok Sabha seats on the 25th of May 2024. They will vote for the assembly elections on the 5th of October 2024. That means within a span of 130 odd days, voters in Haryana will be voting for the second time. Same goes for Maharashtra, which will be voting right after Haryana, or Delhi in February next year. The list is endless. The government plans to end this. The Union Cabinet, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, today declared the hugely consequential One Nation, One Poll. For convenience sake, I will call it ONOP. The opposition's reaction was expected, and that's why the execution of this move will be a climb over the Mount Everest for this government.
प्रैक्टिकल नहीं है और ये चलने वाला नहीं है. ये सिर्फ चुनाव जब आते कोई ना कोई कुछ मुद्दा नहीं मिल रहा उनको, ऐसी चीजें बात करने के लिए, इश्यू को डाइवर्ट करने के लिए वो बात करते हैं, और इसीलिए और पूरे देश के लोग कोई मानने वाले भी नहीं हैं.
दिस इज अ सॉल्यूशन इन सर्च ऑफ अ प्रॉब्लम. अब ये नहीं बताया जा रहा है कि ये करने की क्यों जरूरत पड़ रही है आपको. कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन चलेगा तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन प्रिंसिपल्स के ऊपर चलेगा. तो बेसिकली नरेंद्र मोदी सिर्फ क्योंकि बीजेपी की आइडियोलॉजी आरएसएस की हमेशा ही रही है कि वो रीजनल पार्टीज को नहीं चाहते, इसीलिए वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन का एक मार रहे हैं तुग्गा. हम तो इसकी मुखालिफत किए हैं और मुखालिफत करेंगे, अपोज करेंगे.
भारतीय जनता पार्टी का एक वैसा ही जुमला है जैसे किसानों के लिए कानून बिना किसानों से डिस्कस किए लेकर आए, डीमोनेटाइजेशन बिना एक्सपर्ट से डिस्कस किए लाए, जैसे कोरोना में ये थाली बजवाए, ये वैसे ही एक नया जुमला है. इसका कोई कुछ होना जाना नहीं.
Let's look at how widespread elections in India warrant the need for ONOP. At the start of 2024, 6 states were due to have elections. These were Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Andhra Pradesh and Odisha in June 2024. Haryana and Maharashtra in November 2024. In the year 2025, it will witness the elections to 2 state legislative assemblies and 1 union territory, Jharkhand, Bihar and Delhi. There are 4 states with 1 union territory with elections due in 2026, Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Assam, Kerala and UT of Puducherry. In the year 2027, elections to 6 states, Manipur, Goa, Punjab, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh and Gujarat. Finally, 2028, the remaining 10 states will undergo state legislative assembly elections. But if so widespread are the electoral exercises, how can they all converge from one India, many elections to one nation, one poll? The government thinks it has an answer. Prime Minister Modi had set up a panel headed by no less than ex-President of India, Ramnath Kovind, to examine the issue. The committee submitted its report in March this year to President Droupadi Murmu. The Union Cabinet has in principle accepted the report. Now, there is a 2-step solution. Broadly, I will condense it. First step for ONOP will be synchronized state assemblies and Lok Sabha polls. Second will be municipalities and panchayats at the same time as Lok Sabha and Assembly, means all elections in India come under one category then. The most critical element of the Kovind Committee report is when and how the exercise will be implemented. Now, the way forward for the ONOP is government will create laws to restore ONOP. President of India to notify an appointed date. Notification on day of the first Lok Sabha sitting after a Lok Sabha polls. Now, technically, if you look at it, this is an indication. Note the last line I said. President is likely to notify the appointed date after the Lok Sabha poll and on the first sitting of Lok Sabha. That means the ONOP exercise has been cleared now, but it will kick in from 2029 when the next Lok Sabha elections is. But now, there is a catch. The government is tight-lipped on whether this specific recommendation is going to be adhered to or being accepted. Listen to INB Minister Ashwini Vaishnav saying what all needs to be done before a law is moved.
Our government believes in creating a consensus on items which affect our democracy, our nation in the long run. Common electoral roll. एक पूरे देश में एक कॉमन इलेक्शन की जो रोल है वो होना चाहिए, वोटर लिस्ट होनी चाहिए. तो वो वोटर लिस्ट राज्य सरकार के सहयोग के से ही बन पाएगी.
The minister didn't commit, but the bill may or may not come up in the winter session of parliament. Though the government has cleared it, the cabinet has cleared the move, but there is a long road ahead of it. Why? Because the government is saying that it will go for consensus, means wider discussions, all stakeholders. Two major constitutional amendments have to be there. State governments have to be on board. Now, common electoral rolls for ONOP are needed. So these are things which can delay it. Next, the road is longer and tougher because two constitution bills are needed. A total 15 amendments to the constitution are needed. Now, what are the changes required? Currently, Assembly's tenure is 5 years. Change needed to cut tenure of assemblies elected after the appointed date. Remember, I said President of India to announce the appointed date. Now, in case expiry is beyond the term of Lok Sabha, that's the condition. Now, what is the history? Initially in India, that is from 1952, two elections were held every 10 years, means Lok Sabha and assemblies together. Then there was a disruption, but there was successful attempt to bring the board back to the shores of ONOP in the past. So it's not the first time really. Let's go back to the history. 1951-52, the first elections to Lok Sabha were held, including the assemblies, to a total 489 seats. In 1953, Andhra Pradesh was created from the Madras region. 1955, the first Andhra Assembly elections are held. Note the dates. 1956, Reorganization of State Act is passed. 1957, the second general election is held. 1957, the term of 7 assemblies did not end with the term of Lok Sabha. 1957, when the second polls are held, right after that, 5 years later, third elections for Lok Sabha and assemblies are held. 13 assemblies elections are held together. Now, all assemblies were dissolved to hold ONOP at that time. So it had happened in the past. But since then, a lot has happened that derailed ONOP. It got derailed actually. What are the big reasons? One big reason is the dismissal of state governments by the central government. Congress did many of them. They were hung verdicts, so there was a delay in the government formation. Then there was president's rule. That delayed the formation of assembly, means the elections of next elections. Now several elections are being held every year. It's a fact. This casts a huge burden on the government, businesses, workers, courts, political parties, candidates contesting elections, and the civil society at large. Now, what are the negatives of having many elections in each year or between a term of a Lok Sabha? Now, in 2024, for the elections to the 18th Lok Sabha, a total 70 lakh people or personnel were on poll duty. That's a cost. 12.08 lakh polling stations were there, so they had to be created. There has to be a staff, electricity, and infrastructure has to be created. 3.4 lakh central police deployed. 3.4 lakh central police. Don't talk about the state polices, because a state like UP has more than 2.5 lakh policemen who were all on duty. Now, total expenses as per Election Commission's records, if we don't count the black money, the hawala transactions and all the illegal money which gets pumped into election expenses, the total honest cost of election was 70,000 crore roundabout. That means 2.33 thousand crore each state. That's the average. It may be more in UP, lesser in Nagaland. Now the tough road ahead is also very possible because of the political atmosphere in the country and the distrust of the opposition parties in the central government. I don't think there is likely to be any consensus, and that is bad news for the ONOP. Why? It needs 2 constitutional amendments, 15 changes to the laws. The NDA has 293 MPs. That is comfortable because the halfway mark to rule is 272. But constitutional amendments need 2/3 majority. Where the NDA is going to get the numbers from? Now, changes need ratification also, not just from Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. They need the ratification of 50% state assemblies in the country. There is more problem for the BJP. Will the BJP's allies like JDU, JDS and the TDP agree? Now, the Bihar Assembly term ends in November 2025 and the Andhra Assembly term ends in June 2029. Will states with remaining term agree to a curtailing of their term? Now, if you look at the entire picture, these are difficult to digest changes, especially for the opposition in the country to the BJP. It challenges the current perception or norm of federalism. Why should fate of state assemblies be by letter of constitution be linked to the Lok Sabha, the fate of the Lok Sabha? It exposes the state assemblies to the destiny of Lok Sabha. What if the state assemblies are on course for elections, but the Lok Sabha collapses? Then what will happen? Again, democratic principles. That's a challenge. That's what opposition is saying. What happens if the people don't repose faith in one party and there is a hung verdict? What if there are hung verdicts in many states repeatedly? Will term of state assemblies could keep getting synchronized till people vote a party? Means, is this law likely to nudge the people that you need to vote a majority, otherwise your assembly terms will keep getting impaired or curtailed? Does not that impair the fairness of the electoral process? Will it not be an impediment in governments exercising power under other constitutional provisions, say Article 356, to deal with the breakdown of law and order in a state? Because you derail one state election, 2 elections, what's going to happen? Then there are changes that ONOP will be bringing, which are being called unconstitutional against the doctrine of the basic structure of the Constitution of India. As there are requirements for premature dissolution of state legislative assemblies, which comprises elected representatives, that people say would be against the will of the people, because people have voted them for 5 years. The argument being presented is that Constitution provides that during the duration of both the houses of the people, that is Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies, will be for 5 years unless dissolved sooner. So the government and the committee feels that there is ground for that dissolution and will not violate the rights of the people. I think here the public needs to decide. The Kovind Committee sought opinions on its mandate. Now, what were the responses received from the citizenry as far as the committee is concerned when it was forming its report? Through 5th January 2024, a public notice in newspapers across the country, public suggestions were invited by 15th of January 2024. As of 20th February 2024, there were 5,232 responses. 3,837 were supporting the idea, while 1,395 opposed it. India has a population of 140 crore people. 6,000 responses does not make an India. Now, that is the question here, that the kind of brainstorming which has happened, the kind of churning which has happened on a wide issue like this, is it in place for the government to go in soon for pushing ONOP? Thankfully, the government is saying it will try to build a consensus. One point I would like to make here, that in the Keshwanand Bharti and others versus State of Kerala case, the Supreme Court had held that the power to amend is plenary. And the only limitation to this power is that the basic structure of the Constitution cannot be altered. The basic structure of the Constitution. And that the most important constitutional virtue is the rule of law and a free and independent judiciary. Now my final question is the one nation, many polls disturbing the most important constitutional virtue? If yes, ONOP is needed. If not, then the huge tectonic move needs to be scrutinized deeper. If you like our show, like it, comment on it, and please subscribe to Jist. Thank you.